typing in the chat, excuse me. So, رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Inshallah, you're all enjoying your weekend, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your weekends to join us today. My name is Iman. I'm here on behalf of CARE. I'm a volunteer for CARE. I'm also a political staffer and have spent 4 years working in the state and local level. Spent 3 years working in the state legislature, and now actually on my second year on the local level. And today is really just about spreading the word and getting all the information out about the Maryland 90-day session, how people can sign up to testify, either written testimony or oral testimony, and how we can really be engaged in the political space as the Muslim community, specifically given all the pain that the Muslim community has been going through, especially within the past 6 months. So with that, I would like to introduce our special guest, Delegate Gabe Acevedo. He is in the Maryland General Assembly right now, representing Montgomery County. And I won't butcher your introduction, Delegate, so I will hand the mic off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, my friend. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. As was mentioned, I'm Delegate Gabriel Acevedo, and I'm proud to serve Maryland's 39th Legislative District, which is a legislative district in the northwestern part of Montgomery County. This is not the first time that I've been on a CARE meeting with membership. It is really good to be back. Just really wanted to share and just continue to be proud of the fact that I have a huge, growing, and thriving Muslim community that is certainly very engaged. I've been hearing from many constituents about what's taking place right now in Reza and the rise in Islamophobia and the impact that it has had on Muslim and Arab communities, both here in District 39, across the state and the country. And so this evening, it's certainly my pleasure to join you all at the invitation of CARE to have a discussion, really a teach-in, a very brief teach-in, because we're hoping for this to be a dialogue, a discussion. We'd love to hear from you all and to be able to answer your questions. And we encourage you to jot them down or put them in the chat so that we're able to answer them later on. But it is really good to be here with each and every one of you all. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and kick us off, get us started, particularly on the legislative process, which I think as Maryland residents, folks should certainly be aware of, familiarize themselves with, and be very versed so that they're able to engage with their state legislators on issues that matter to them, not necessarily this legislative session, but in future legislative sessions as well, to ensure that you, the Muslim community, CARE, its membership, are effectively engaging with the people that you vote for, the people that represent you and should represent you, and how to be able to do that. And so with that, if you could...
Yep, let me share my screen really quickly. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Can we raise hands if everybody can see the screen again? Perfect. Okay. Show's yours, Delegate. Delegate, I think you're on.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I had myself briefly muted there. But if everyone can go to, whether it's open a web browser or on your phone, and if you can type in MD for Maryland, elect, ELECT .net, N-E-T. And essentially, that is a website for any Marylander, regardless of where you live, if you were to go to that website, that web browser, and you were to punch in your address, it will pull up essentially all of the people that represent you at the federal, state, and at the local level. It also includes a hyperlink where you can click on it, and it'll be able to take you to an email where you can essentially compose an email to any one of your elected officials or representatives. There's a hyperlink for that. Yes, we will definitely drop it in the chat. But again, it's MD for Maryland, elect, ELECT.net. And once you have pulled that up and you punch in your address, it will tell you everyone that represents you at the federal, state, and local level. So as was mentioned earlier, again, I'm Delegate Gabriel Severo, and I represent Legislative District 39, and that includes the communities of Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village, Germantown, Clarksburg, and Washington Grove. I'm proud to say that District 39 is also home to many mosques and the Islamic Society of Maryland, and the Islamic Society of Germantown, and the Islamic Center of Maryland, and really just a community that's engaged. And so tonight, it is really good to be with you all to provide that overview. Next slide, please. Perfect. Next slide. Good. All right. So the Maryland General Assembly is the state legislature for Maryland. It is what we describe as a citizen legislature, meaning that it is a part-time legislature. We meet 90 days out of the year, January through April, and we have the responsibility of really dealing with all bills or resolutions that have been introduced in the state legislature for consideration. We also have to pass our state's budget for the next fiscal year. We also have a responsibility to have hearings, oversight, subcommittee meetings, oversight committee meetings, etc. And essentially that 90-day is a sprint. It's our opportunity to get as much as we can get done within that 90-day time frame. And when we adjourn sine die, or meaning the end of the session, we're all back in our districts. We're still doing work. We're working on your behalf. We're just a little bit closer to home. And so the legislative session starts this Wednesday, January 10th. We go into session every year on the second Wednesday of January per our state's constitution. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to run through really quick the legislative process because a lot of folks have reached out to my office. I've heard from constituents, I've heard from advocates and activists about introducing a bill, how a bill gets passed, what do we need to do, etc. And really this flow chart provides you with an overview of how a bill becomes a law and what needs to be done. And really, in this flowchart, you would see that that there's, well, one, it begins with first reading the bill. A bill is introduced and it is read for the first time across the desk, as we say, by the speaker and the House clerk, etc. But really, a bill or a resolution should start not with a first reading, but with constituents and with the people, because that's where a majority of our ideas come from. When you see bills related to your local community or things that changes things within our community or things that we do not like, most cases it starts with constituents and people, you all telling us, your representatives, hey, somebody should do something about that traffic light. Hey, somebody should do something about the fact that all of our kids are not being fed while they're in schools. And we as your representatives then will put together that legislative language or the language of a bill. So a bill is basically a law before it becomes a law. And then we would introduce it. So any one of your state delegates and state senators can introduce a bill. The Maryland General Assembly has 188 members. It is a bicameral legislature, meaning that there are two houses. You have the House of Delegates, where I serve, and there's 141 members in the House of Delegates. And then you have the State Senate, which has 47 members from each legislative district. totaling 188 state legislators charged with the responsibility of passing laws governing Maryland, balancing the budget, etc. And so when the bill is introduced by any one of your state delegates and state senators, because any one of us can introduce a bill, it is read for the first time and referred to a committee. There are various standing committees in the House and in the Senate, and really what the committees are just subject matter committees. So for example, I talked earlier about why we need to ensure that all of our kids, when they're in school, have a free and nutritious meal. If we were to introduce a bill that would effectively ensure that all children, regardless of income, are able to get free school meals when in school, then that bill would be referred to a committee that deals with education, that deals with food security and nutrition, et cetera. And in this case, the free school meals, that would be the House Ways and Means Committee. So in the House of Delegates, there are House committees that each of us sit on. I am on the House Appropriations Committee, which oversees our state's capital and operating budget. So your tax dollars, we determine how to spend that. There's the House Economic Matters Committee that deals with things related to workers, businesses, industry. You also have the House Environment and Transportation Committee that deals with transportation, the environment. You have the House Ways and Means Committee that deals with tax policy and, whether we need to raise taxes, whether we need to, do anything with respect to our schools. That goes to the Ways and Means Committee. Then you have the House Judiciary Committee, which deals with all things legal, criminal, and related to our judiciary. And so whenever a bill is introduced, it is assigned or sent to any one of these committees. And so for the purposes of this example, I'm going to use one of the House resolutions that, I will be introducing around a permanent ceasefire, right? And so, for example, I introduce the House resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire, Maryland support for a permanent ceasefire. It will be read the first time across the desk and assigned to a committee. And in this case, the committee that would likely be assigned to is Rules and Executive Nominations Committee in the House. They deal with House resolutions and anything related to resolutions, executive nominations, and anything with respect to the House rules. When it is assigned to a committee, it is given a hearing date. All bills that are introduced are guaranteed a hearing date, and every single Marylander, regardless of where you live in this state, you are able to sign up to testify on a bill or bills. There's no limit. If there are bills that interest you, you should definitely take a look at our MGA website, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But you can testify on any one of these bills once you have signed up, public comment period, and you have up to 3 minutes. In some instances, some committees allow you 2 minutes to be able to testify. Once the bill is then heard in committee, it is sent to a subcommittee where more work is done on it by a smaller group of state legislators. And then it is passed out of subcommittee and then by that committee as a whole. And then it is sent for second reader. Second reader is essentially when it comes to, it is passed out of committee and it comes to the House floor for the entire House to debate it, to amend the bill or resolution, or to disagree and to express that disagreement on the particular bill or legislation. Once the bill is passed on second reader, it goes to a third reader. Third reader basically means that we're getting ready to pass this bill or resolution out of the House or chamber that we're in. In this case, it's the House of Delegates. So if the committee, the Rules and Executive Nominations, were to vote the ceasefire resolution out of committee, it would go from second reader to third reader, which again would mean it will come to the House floor. We would debate it. We will not be able to amend the bill on third reader, but then we will pass it. And then it goes to the second chamber, which is the state Senate. I just mentioned there are 47 members of the state Senate, 141 members of the House. So once we pass it in the House or it's passed in the Senate, it then goes over to the second chamber, whether it's the House or the Senate. And in this case, our resolution, our ceasefire resolution, is now going over to the state Senate. And it starts the process all over again, similar to the House. You have a first reading. The resolution will be heard will be introduced in the state Senate and read across the desk. It will then be referred to a committee in the Senate, which in this case, it will likely be rules and executive nominations in the state Senate, or it may be another bill. It may be another committee that it's assigned to. But once it's referred to a committee, again, you can sign up to testify on that bill in the Senate when there is a hearing date. And then it's passed to second reader, where it comes to the Senate floor. They debate it some more, and then it goes to third reader, where it's ready for passage. Once it is passed, if the resolution is passed by the House chamber and the Senate chamber, and there are two different resolutions that are passed. So for example, let's say the House chamber passed the ceasefire resolution that also includes an amendment or language that says we must also be against the rise in settlements in the West Bank, et cetera, and the Senate version also passed a ceasefire resolution, but it does not include an amendment or language about settlements in the West Bank or elsewhere. The two chambers, the House and the Senate, will then try to figure out, because they've effectively passed a resolution that is not the same. So then they will come together in what we call, for consideration, conference committee, when the House and the Senate comes together and they try to work out those differences so that they're able to then both chambers pass one resolution. So if the House passed the ceasefire resolution with settlement language in it and the Senate didn't do it, you will have conference committee between the House and the Senate to figure out, do we include that language in the Senate version? Do we remove it from the House version? But what can we agree upon right now so that we can get it passed and get it to the governor's desk? Once they've decided on that, we then pass it as a legislature, the Maryland General Assembly. It passes the House and the state Senate, and it goes over to the governor, who has a number of options. One, he can sign it. Two, he can veto it. And three, he can allow it to become law without his signature. And a lot of governors tend to use different options when it comes to bills and resolutions. And so once it goes to the governor and it's signed into law, and that is something that is the law for the state of Maryland. Next slide, please. So I want to go over just really quickly some key concepts. I mentioned earlier a bill. A bill is basically a proposed legislation. You will hear it a lot at the county council level or at the municipal level. You will hear that your county council member or city council member is introducing what is called a CB, a council bill, or you would see in Annapolis where we would introduce an HB, House bill, or SB, Senate bill. It essentially, the acronym CB, HB, SB essentially tells you where the bill originated from. So if I introduce the House resolution, right, in the House, it will say HR, meaning House resolution. If I introduced a bill, it will say HB 123, right? House Bill 123. And then it is sent to committee. We talked a little bit about the committee. The committee is really made up of some members of the General Assembly whose responsibility it is to just really dig into this bill, this resolution, and try to figure out how to, get it passed, look at the language. What do we need to take out? What do we need to add? What do we need to consider? And then veto, as I mentioned earlier, a veto power is really executive power that lies solely with your mayor, your county executive, your governor. These are the folks who essentially have the power to veto or to disagree with a bill that was passed. So when your county council passes a bill, it goes to your county executive. Iman mentioned that she's a council staffer in Baltimore County. When they pass legislation, it goes to the county executive, Johnny O. I live in Montgomery County. When our county council passes bills, it then goes to our county executive, Mark Elrich, who signs it into law. The process is very much the same at the state level. when we, the legislative branch, the state legislature, pass bills, it then goes to the governor's desk for either signature, his approval, or for him to veto it, meaning he doesn't like it or he disagrees with it, or he would allow it to become law without his signature. Next slide, please. So we went over this earlier. Who can introduce a bill? I'm a state delegate. I'm one of 141 members of the House of Delegates, which you vote for, the people that represent you. And then there are 47 members of the state Senate. All of us have the power to introduce a bill in the state legislature for consideration. No matter who you are, where you represent, your political affiliation, we can all introduce bills for consideration. The committees hold hearings. We mentioned that earlier. Please, and we'll go through the MGA website in a little bit so that everyone is familiar with the Maryland General Assembly website, how to find your representative. You can find them very easily on the website. And once you click on their profile, you can also find out about all the bills that they have introduced for this legislative session. Not previous, but this legislative session. You can find bills that we've introduced in the past, but every year the MGA website is updated to include all of the bills that we have introduced for that particular session, right? And then we talked a little bit about the House and the Chamber being able to revise bills and to amend them. And we talked a little bit about the concept of conference committee. When the House and the Senate pass a bill that looks different, then they have to come together to figure out those differences in order to get it passed, or it won't be passed. Next slide, please. So we could go to the next slide. So the 2020, so real quick, really proud of this picture before we move on. For participants, the picture on the left is an organization, Interfaith Works, that does a lot of amazing work here in Montgomery County and in my district. But next to that, to the right of that, is a picture of myself, CARES director, volunteers, staff, and student leaders who showed up in Annapolis last year to advocate on one of CARE's priorities, and really a priority for a number of student advocacy groups across our state. And that is to ensure that regardless of one's religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, that you are able to safely and comfortably practice those beliefs on a college campus or a university campus, that your studies and your academics shouldn't be hampered as a result of that, and that no student, regardless of their religious or spiritual belief, should feel that they are not welcomed or included in campus planning, to include whether it's a room where students can go to practice their faith, to meet, to ensuring that there are proper accommodations for students for religious reasons or observances. But we were able to not just get that bill introduced. We had a really good hearing. We were able to turn out student leaders, parents who turned up. Each and every, some of you who are on this call were probably there as well, but we made an impact. Our impact was felt. And the outcome of that is we were able to get that changed to ensure that there is accommodations for students at Maryland colleges and universities, both public and private, that each university that this change is applicable to are then accommodating students on campus, et cetera. Next slide, please. But I mentioned that so that folks, next slide, so that folks can essentially have an idea about just the power of impact. I know folks know that. You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't believe it. But just, to show folks that if we show up, if we engage, and we continue to do so, that we really have the power to change the things that we cannot accept, as opposed to accepting the things that we can change, right? Next slide, please. And that's in front of our council office building. Last year, we were pushing for for rent stabilization. Montgomery County is one of the most expensive places to live, both in our state and in this country. And so we were pushing for a council bill, CB, a council bill that would ensure rent stabilization, caps, and landlords and developers not being able to exploit tenants. Next slide, please. And we talked earlier about committees. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. I mentioned a few of them earlier. I highlighted the first one, the Appropriations Committee, because that's the committee that I serve on. Again, it deals with all things budget. If you have any questions about where your tax dollars are spent, what it goes towards, what's in the budget, what we allocate, what we earmark, what we fund, that is the Appropriations Committee. It deals with specifically the budget, capital and operating. It deals with higher education. It deals with workers' rights and collective bargaining, etc. You have economic matters, environment and transportation, health and government operations. You have judiciary, rules, and executive nominations. We talked about that earlier. I suspect that will be the committee that our ceasefire resolution will be assigned to. And then you have the Ways and Means Committee, right? All of these committees do important work, and it's critical that you know, in addition to who your state delegates and state senator is, what committee he, she, or they serve on, because we all serve on committees. And that is critically important that you know what committee that they serve on, right? If your state senator is on the Judiciary Committee, you need to be talking to him about some of these law enforcement surveillance programs that they employ when it comes to Muslim communities. If your state delegate sits on the Rules and Executive Nominations Committee, they need to be hearing from you, and you need to be asking them whether they have signed on to the ceasefire resolution, if they support it, and whether they intend to vote for it in the committee so that it comes out of committee. And that's really, really important. All bills are assigned to a committee, but not all bills come out of committee. I'll say that again. All bills are assigned to a committee, but not all bills come out of committee. And the reason why that's important is because you have chairs and vice chairs and some members who either don't support it or try to, as we say, kill the bill, meaning put it in the drawer, don't bring it up for a vote. We're not going to vote it out of committee so it doesn't get to the House floor. And what really makes the difference whether a bill comes out of committee is your advocacy, your engagement, whether you reach out to your county council member, your city council member, or whether you reach out to your state delegates or your state senator, that all of that determines whether a bill gets out of committee or whether it stays in it. Next slide. That's our county council. Next slide, please. Rent stabilization, just me. All right, the 2024 legislative session, this is just a spotlight of some of the bills that I'll be introducing. I'll just take this time to talk about the three priorities that I'll be introducing, priorities of CARE, but also a number of other organizations that are working in coalition with CARE Maryland. And the first is, you already know, a ceasefire resolution, a permanent ceasefire resolution. I'll be introducing that. I've already introduced it, pre-filed it actually. And so when the session starts this Wednesday, you will more than likely, if you were to go on the MDGA website and look under my name, you'll be able to see all the bills and resolutions I've introduced, and you'll be able to click on the ceasefire resolution, read the language, see who are some of the folks who have sponsored the resolution and bills. So when I say sponsor, every bill that's introduced, whether it's a council bill or a House bill or a Senate bill, we tend to go to our colleagues, other state delegates, state senators, and council members to get their support and buy-in on it, right? And the way we do that is by asking them to sponsor or co-sponsor the bill. So I am the sponsor of the bill, of the resolution, the ceasefire resolution, because I'm putting it in. But we also want to ensure that other people are supporting the resolution as well. So I would reach out to state delegates from Baltimore County or Baltimore City or Prince George's County to sign on, to become a co-sponsor, meaning to sign their name. So once you see this resolution, you will know it is supported by Delegate Acevero, delegate, well, he's no longer a delegate now, he's a council member, but, you know, this delegate, that delegate, etc. If you don't see your delegate's name on a bill or resolution, it is your right, it is your responsibility to reach out to your member or your representatives and to ask them, right? Especially if it's an issue that's important to you. If you want to make sure kids are fed in during when they're in school, and there's a bill that would provide free school meals, then reach out to your state delegate or your state senator and ask them, there's this issue that I support. I see there's a bill that's been introduced that would ensure all of our kids are fed. I would love for you to co-sponsor it, or is this something that you support and intend to co-sponsor? But all of that is your way of essentially engaging with your representatives. Next slide. Oh, actually, before we move on, that's the first one, which is the ceasefire resolution. The second bill that I have pre-filed is a bill that I got from a constituent. Again, this is how bills are introduced, right? Remember what I said earlier, majority of the bills that we introduce come from people, our constituents, people that we hear from. So the second bill is around settlements and Maryland nonprofits, and supporting or working with any organization that supports or builds settlements in the West Bank. There's a bill that I have pre-filed to ensure that we are not, as a state, supporting illegal settlements being built in the West Bank, and that there aren't Maryland nonprofits that are working with other organizations, because Maryland nonprofits get state funding. But also, we as a state, we invest our tax dollars in various companies, both here in the United States and across the world. So when you hear a lot of discussion about divestment and not supporting Starbucks or McDonald's or what have you, this is an example of that. It's ensuring that we as a state, Maryland, our tax dollars are not being used for anything that does not align with our values. That is building of illegal settlements when it is something that we know is illegal, should not be done, in a violation of international law. Next, please. This is just some pictures of the House and the Senate chamber. On the left, where you see the blue carpet, that's the House of Delegates. Again, 141 members from 47 legislative districts. So Maryland has 47 legislative districts across the state, and each legislative district elects 3 members to the House of Delegates. Now, that isn't always true. You have some sub-districts, for example, District 9A, District 47B, which are essentially sub-districts that have one state delegate representing it. But generally, all legislative districts, all 47 legislative districts, elect 3 members to the House of Delegates and 1 member to the state Senate. So regardless of where you live in Maryland, you have 4 people representing you at the state level. You have 3 state delegates in the House and 1 state senator. So what that means is that 4 people should be hearing from you. 4 people should know whether you support something. 4 people should know that you are their constituent. And 4 people should know that you're paying attention to how they vote and what it is that they do in Annapolis. Next slide. All right, so how to contact your state delegate's office. This is information that I've provided to my constituents on how to contact my office. But I gave you one resource earlier, and that's mdelect.net. Once you punch in your address and you know all of the people that represent you, the next step is how to contact them. But you can't contact your representatives if you don't know who represents you at the federal, state, and local level. That's a very, very important, right? Not just in knowing who to reach out to, but in terms of advocacy and effective advocacy. If you don't know who to pressure and where to apply the pressure, then it's very likely that the issue that you or we all care deeply about could be impacted by that. And so please familiarize yourself with the phone number, with the email address, and with the office address of your state delegates and state senator. I've provided my office phone number on there. The address that I provided for our office is the same for all state delegates. We're all in the Low House office building. That's where you can find all of your state delegates' office. And then the email address, once you have punched in your address on mdelect.com and it pulls up all who represents you, you will see their email address, a hyperlink to it where you can easily send them an email. Next slide, please. That's the last one. Wonderful. I think we're done, right? Excellent.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And with that, I'll just go ahead and pitch it on back to my co-host for this evening. And, you know, if you can, Iman, I don't know if you have any thoughts, not to put you on the spot, but there are a lot of county councils and city councils that are essentially passing resolutions condemning Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate, to resolutions about what's taking place right now in Reza. And I think it would be helpful for folks to understand, in addition to how you engage with your state legislators, how does one contact their city or their county council member? Not necessarily on this issue. It'd be great if folks can indiscriminate bombings that we're seeing in Reza and the displacement of Palestinians. There are only 2 Maryland elected officials in the entire state at the federal, state, and local level, despite, well, it was 66% of Americans that support a ceasefire. To date, it is now 69% of Americans that support a ceasefire. 70% of Americans disapprove of President Biden's handling of the conflict. And so I say that to say that there should be way more voices besides Delegate Ashanti Martinez from Prince George's County and myself, the only 2 people who have called for a ceasefire in the General Assembly. And I'll be introducing a resolution. I've already heard from Delegate Martinez that that is something that he supports. But your representatives, your state delegates, your state senator, your county council member, and city council members need to hear from you, and they need to be responding to the uptick of Islamophobic violence that we're seeing both in our state and across the country. They need to speak out about the indiscriminate bombings, because we all have an impact. We all do, right? And even though we have federal elected officials, we work with those federal elected officials and they hear from us a lot. So those same council members that represent you, that meet with your congressperson every other month to talk about federal issues that impact local government, they can have those conversations with them, right? And I saw someone indicated in the chat that Montgomery County Council member at large, Will Jawando, recently, and that is correct, recently, as in a couple of days ago, indicated his support for a ceasefire, and I'm glad to see that. I hope that that is followed up with some sort of a resolution by the council, but also the council denouncing the cases of Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate that we have been seeing, taking place. So it is important that you all engage with your elected officials, the people that represent you, because if you don't, then we have, well, not we, because I don't include myself in that, but they don't have any reason to then act on it. So with that, Iman, if you could just talk a little bit, if I could pitch it over to you to talk a little bit about the county government and how folks can engage with their local elected officials, the people where the rubber meets the road, basically.
Sure. And I just want to thank you, Delegate, for that lovely presentation. I could not say all of that so eloquently, especially first reader, second reader. I always get confused on that part. So I do work for local government. And I think local government is different than the state level because it's a much smaller body. So most councils, you'll have 11 members, 7 members, somewhere within that number. And so it's a lot more difficult to get votes on certain things because you can't just go to another person and say, hey, I need you to vote for this. Or, you can't just ask another council member if you're one of maybe 25 members. Your vote when you're on the council carries more weight because it's such a small body. That being said, local government is still a very important faction of government in general. While we might not deal with the fancy issues and it's more related to everyday things, you know, trash pickup, potential problems that you're having, your roads, zoning, all of the really dry, boring stuff that nobody really wants to talk about or nobody really wants to work on is what we do, or you know what I try to do. But I think it is still very important, and it changes from county to county. So, for example, the Montgomery County Council, they have a website that is very much like the MGA website, which is what we'll go through in a second, where you'll be able to see all of your council members and their contact information. And the county council also has separate districts as well. So while you have 47 legislative districts, you also have councilmanic districts within that district, if that makes sense. I can show it on a map later on, and I'm a visual person, so I do need that. Before I go over to the MGA website, we did receive a question, Delegate Acevero, and I don't know if you would like me to answer it or if you want to answer it, but somebody asked in the chat, is business conducted, so like hearings and testimonies and all the public facing parts of the MGA, is that also done on the weekends?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There are, and first, yes. So there are times where we do come in on Saturdays during the legislative session to debate and to pass bills. So there are times where we are in Annapolis on Saturdays. We've never been in Annapolis or in session on Sundays, at least from what I can recall. So it's very infrequent that we meet on the weekends, but we are in session, whether it's maybe passing or debating the budget or a bill. That does happen, yes. But in terms of a bill and testifying on it, you can do so in person. And now one thing that we fought for, a lot of us, and we were able to keep with some committees, but not with all. Some reason it's chamber by chamber, but we're trying to keep in place COVID rules that allowed individuals to sign up to testify on a bill and to then log in virtually to be able to do that, because we do recognize that not everyone is able to make that trek to the state's capital, Annapolis. Not everyone is able to take time off from their work or to be able to be there in person to testify. And so we want to ensure that people are able to do so regardless of their ability. And so by having virtual testimonies and keeping that in place from the time of COVID, we're allowing more people to be able to engage with their government and to be heard. So it's still a fight. There are some committees that do allow you to sign up and then to testify virtually, but please pay attention to that, because not all committees are allowing it. Not all chairs are allowing people to log in virtually to do it, but some chairs are.
Thank you. So now I'm going to go through like a step-by-step guide of everything he just said, but on the MGA website. So I'll go ahead and drop that link into the chat. So if you would like to, you can follow along with me. And we will go from there. You feel free to type your questions in the chat. I will respond to most questions, or as many questions that I can, or the delegate will respond to as many questions as he can once the screen sharing has officially stopped. So feel free to drop your questions whenever, and then I'll just scroll up and go through them towards the end. Give me 1 second so I can share my screen. All right, can we do a raise of hands for people who can see my screen once more? Perfect. And I did send a link in the chat, so feel free to follow along as well over there on your own. So this is the Maryland General Assembly website. It's fairly intuitive and it's a lot better designed than it used to be when I first started. So I started in 2019. This has improved light years almost. So what I want to talk about first is this piece right here. So if you go to members under the Maryland General Assembly website and you hit find my representatives. So here is the map of all the legislative districts in the state, as well as the congressional districts. So you can see where you live and then kind of figure it out that way. Or the easier way to do it is you go to look up right here, click on that, and enter an address. So I'll do an example. So 6 Bladen Street, that's the address of the House office building in Annapolis, where all the delegates have offices. And then you type in the address, the street address, and the zip code, and you click find. Then it'll do its little thing, and then you will see all of this information. So the governor, Governor Westmore, the Lieutenant Governor Erwin Miller, the AG, who's Anthony Brown, our comptroller, who is Brooke Lehrman, and then your congressional reps as well, and then your legislative district. So, for example, this address is in Legislative District 30A, and these are all the people that represent it. So you have 2 delegates in this district, Delegate Shanika Henson and Delegate Dana Jones. And your state senator would be Senator Elfreth. And if I click on, for example, Delegate Jones's hyperlink, it takes me to her biography page, right? So I've got all of this information about what district she represents, what county, what committee she's assigned to, and she serves with Delegate Acevero on the Appropriations Committee in the House. Then I scroll down a little bit, and here is all of her office address information. So 161 Little House Office Building is where she will be some of the time during session, because when they go to committee, some committees are going to be in person this year, some committees might be virtual. Those protocols and guidelines have not been released yet. But this will also be her office phone number. So her staff will answer this phone number, or if they don't answer, feel free to leave a message. Staff usually gets back to people when they leave messages. And her contact information via email is right here. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns on anything that's coming in front of appropriations or anything that is occurring within her district, just shoot her an email, and that would be you contacting your representative. There's also 2 other tabs here that I want to point out. One is the legislation. And right now, what is being shown on this website, so this bill right here, it's House Bill 111. So the delegate talked about when a bill is introduced, it gets an HB. So because she's a delegate and she's introducing it in the House, it has an HB. And the bill number is just kind of the order in which it was introduced. So whoever, sent their bill draft request over to the bill drafters first, they get House Bill 1. That's generally how it works. Delegate, correct me if I'm mistaken, but that's
You're
how
absolutely right. And I'll also add to, or in other words, it's usually reserved for the speaker.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we don't mess with the speaker. She's lovely, but that is always reserved, or most of the time reserved. So when I click on HB 111 is the hyperlink. Delegate Acevero was also referring to all of the steps that occur in the legislative process. And you can see it's been introduced within the original chamber because it's been pre-filed, right? And it'll go to first reading, and then it would be referred to committee. So the committee that it would be referred to, because it's a bicycles, play vehicles, and unicycles bill, probably environment and transportation. And it was also introduced in a prior session as a different bill. And usually this will also be in blue, and you'll be able to click on it so you can actually see the text of the bill. But let me see if I can do that with the prior bill. So for example, this was the bill that the delegate introduced last session, so in 2023, and it's the same bill generally speaking, but if you click here where it's the hyperlink is and it's highlighted in blue, you will open up the actual bill text, and it says House Bill 519. So where it says by, these are the sponsors. So Delegate Dana Jones, primary sponsor. Delegate Bagnall, probably a co-sponsor on the bill. And then the committee that it was assigned to, the committee report was favorable. So that means it got voted out of Environment and Transportation Committee last year. The House adopted it, which means the House passed it as well. And then you scroll down a little bit and you get to the actual bill text. So whatever is in bold means something that is being added to the bill into existing law. And there's also an explanation under the first page if you forget, which is, I forget it all the time when I'm reading stuff like this. So hers is a very straightforward bill. It's 2 pages. The budget that Delegate Acevero deals with tends to be hundreds of pages long from my experience of reading it. So this is fairly straightforward with the 2 pages. Because legislation can be somewhat difficult to read, especially if it's your first time going through the bill, staffers, or excuse me, the policy analyst staff in Department of Legislative Services, they also put out this fiscal and policy note, and you can click that as well. And I find it to be a very useful guide of, what the bill actually does. If I can't understand what it's saying just in the way that it's written, this kind of breaks it down, gives a good analysis, what's changing, what's not changing, and all of that good stuff. So I would highly suggest reading the fiscal and policy notes if you're interested in reading legislation. So then the next thing, you'll still scroll down to members, and if you would like to look at specific members within a chamber, so either the Senate or the House, I'm going to choose the House because I worked in the House and I'm biased. So I'll go ahead and click on Delegate Acevero's profile because he's with us right now. And it's the same thing here. We have his office address, the committee he serves on, the county, the district, as well as his email address and phone number. And the legislation that he has pre-filed is also going to be here. And you can click on any of these to get more information or to read them whenever the bill text does come out. On the far right-hand side, you can see which committee it was assigned to. So for example, Ways and Means for House Bill 50, which is the Commission on History, Culture, and Civics and Education. You already have a bill hearing that's been assigned to it, which is going to be on January 17th at 1 p.m. And if you would like to show your support for the bill, whether it's through oral or written testimony for this bill, you can sign up to testify in support. I'll also be going through that. Something else that the delegate mentioned is committees. And because he serves on appropriations, I will be using you as an example throughout this entire presentation, delegate. I hope you're okay with that.
Love it.
So he serves on appropriations. The committee leadership you have right here. So the chair is Delegate Ben Barnes and the vice chair is Delegate Mark Chang. If you click on these, you'll also go to their biography pages and be able to receive their contact information. And what I really want to highlight about committees is that each one operates a little bit differently when it comes to testimony, when it comes to hearing, when it comes to bill hearings, et cetera. So when you're looking to testify in support of a bill, or you just want to reach out to, the members about this bill, you can also see which members sit on this committee, and you'll get the entire membership of everybody that has been assigned to appropriations. And you'll be able to contact them. You click on their link right here, you'll be able to see all of their contact information as well. You can also see what legislation has been assigned to a specific committee. So if you hit legislation under the Appropriations Committee tab, you'll be able to see every single bill that has been pre-filed and has already been assigned to appropriations. Some of them even have bill hearing dates. But back to the main page, one thing that's really important is when you scroll a little bit further down, you'll see further information. And when you're testifying on a bill, this is something that you always want to read, which is the witness guidelines and committee FAQs. So this is for the 2023 session. Some committees have updated theirs, some haven't. Looks like Appropriations hasn't put it on the website yet. So because Appropriations also deals specifically with the budget, they will have budget hearings, but that's not what I'm going to talk about right now. Right here, where it says the following chart details sign up and written testimony submission timeline for bill hearings and budget hearings. Usually there is a window about 2 or 3 business days. And once again, this depends on the committee. So once you know what bill you're trying to testify on, you need to find out which committee it will be heard by. And then you need to also find out what is the time frame for you to sign up and testify. So for appropriations, oral testimony sign up and written testimony submission is open for 7 hours, 2 business days prior to a scheduled hearing. And that's between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And you can register to testify online, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Normally, if you're going to be in support of a bill and you reach out to that member who has sponsored the bill, and you're like, hey, I'm interested in testifying. Can you give me more information on how to sign up? Or can you give me the time frame on when testimony sign up is? Because it can be a little bit challenging to figure out. That's why they do put this chart here. And I found it personally to be very helpful, even when I'm signing up my own members or my own principals to testify in other hearings or for their own bills. This is something that I've referred back to time and time again, because it just doesn't register sometimes that 2 business days when the hearing is on a Monday would be Thursday the week before. So having said that, you can also see all the legislation that has been introduced so far. And I do want to keep an eye on the time. So right now, 255 House bills have been introduced. 310 Senate bills have been introduced. I expect this number to skyrocket within the coming weeks, because I think the last day to introduce a bill this session will be February 9th. Is that correct, Delegate? Is February 9th the hopper date?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
That's correct. Yep.
Perfect. And right now I'm just going to go through how to sign up for witness testimony, but I also want to let everybody know that when you scroll all the way down to the quick links, there are also video tutorials on the MGA's website. So understanding a bill, intro to the website, searching for bills, finding a specific legislator. So a lot of the stuff we already went through, but in case you forget or you don't want to refer back to this recording, you'll have like snippet videos on the bottom of the MGA website that are there to help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The way you sign up to testify for a bill is you hit this icon in the upper right hand corner, which says my MGA. I'm already signed in. So you would sign in or you sign up. It's painless, it's easy, it takes about 2 seconds to do both of those things. And then you go to witness sign up, which is right here. Now, because none of the sign up periods are open for any of the committees, there's nothing for me to sign up for. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly, because I have screenshots from 2022 that I will go through and kind of show you how to do it on there. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see this part of my screen? Let's do raising hands again, if you can see my screen. Perfect. Okay, so let me just present that. So right here, I've got my witness signed up. We just went there on the actual MGA live website. So let me see. Let's do a laser pointer. So when the sign up period is open and you hit witness sign up, you'll be able to see all of this stuff right here. So say the bill that we're looking at is this one sponsored by Delegate Davis. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's cut out slightly there, but it's House Bill 260. The hearing is Thursday, January 6, 2022. So theoretically, with the guidelines, I would be signing up to testify in support of this bill on Tuesday, January 4th, 2022. So it's easy enough. You would click the box right here. There will be a check mark that appears like that. And then you'll see this bill. This is a sponsor. This is the bill number. Make sure you're signing up for the right bill number, and keep that in mind. And you'll go to position. So you've got 4 positions on a bill. Favorable just means that you support it. Favorable with amendments just means you're coming in saying, hey, I'm generally in favor of the bill, but I'm only going to be fully in support of this if this is added or if this is subtracted with an amendment. Informational only, we see that a lot with, like informational flyers or PowerPoints, or if there's a subject matter expert coming to testify, but they're not in favor or in opposition of the bill, they're just there to give everybody more information and more context. And then unfavorable is generally that you don't support the bill. So once you click on one of those, it'll be reflected over there. And then here we said favorable, so it'll be favorable over there. Then you're going to move a little bit more to your right, and there will be the testimony drop down. So you've got no testimony, oral, written, or both. Oral testimony is generally better in person, in my opinion, some committees will still have virtual options, but in my personal opinion, when you come in and you testify in person, it allows people to see that you are an actual person. You're not just someone sitting behind a screen. And I think over the past couple of years, we've gotten really accustomed to doing these Zoom things that the personality or the personability factor has been taken out of it. So I'll always opt towards in-person testimony so people can really feel what you're saying or what your concerns are or what your support is about a certain issue. Written testimony, you can submit written testimony on any piece of legislation. So that would just be you writing up a letter being like, hey, I support this. These are the reasons why. Please give this piece of legislation a favorable report. That's how I always end my testimony. Or if you don't want it to pass, you can always say, please, I ask for an unfavorable report on this legislation. So once you hit, oral or written, or if you want to do both, just click on that and then it'll be right there. And then you'll have this little thing here in red that says upload files. So there you're just going to click on it and this will pop up. And normally testimony is only accepted in a PDF format. So if it's written testimony that you've selected, this is where you want to drop in your testimony. If you've just selected oral, then there's no need to complete this step because you're not providing any written testimony. If you've selected both oral and written, which most organizations and most people do for maximum impact, then this is also where you would drop your testimony. And normally it would be, if you have a letterhead, it would be on your letterhead with your signature, et cetera, et cetera. Then you'll hit OK. And then once that is done and you'll see all these fields filled out, you will just hit save. Once you hit save, just click signed up items for all the bills that you have signed up to testify on. And all of the bills that you've signed up should come up on there. And that is the end of how to sign up to testify in Annapolis. Let me go through questions. What is the name of the bill that Delegate Acevedo proposed for a permanent ceasefire? Delegate Acevedo, do you have a number or a name?
Sure. So the resolution doesn't have a name, but we just went through the MGA website. If you were to just continue to pay attention to that website, visit it, you will see both the House resolution and the House resolution number. It won't be an HB, it will be an HR, House resolution, and it will very likely say ceasefire or calls for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza or Gaza. So just keep an eye out for it. I will also say that it is, not it will be, but it is a priority, one of the priorities of CARE Maryland. So if you are plugged into, connected with, pay attention, volunteer, turn out with CARE, then you will most certainly know when it's been introduced, the HR number. CARE also does some pretty, I'm sure they can help with this, some pretty good work on prepping folks for committee hearings. I know we talked about the process, advocacy, how to know who represents you, etc. But I'll just share really quickly, and I know Iman can share some of her experience, both as a staff as she's been in meetings with, advocates as well as organizations, but just how to properly and effectively advocate both for yourself, your community, and also for the issue that you're there to represent, right? Remember that when you are speaking with your elected representatives, you're not just a representation of yourself, you're a representation of the issue that you are raising. And so if you show yourself to not be a legitimate authority on that issue, and there are ways that you can do that: one, lying; two, providing that particular member with disingenuous information to speaking from a position of experience that you yourself don't have experience. So, for example, it's probably not good right now, especially with what's going on, that we amplify and lift up the voices of Palestinians and Palestinian Americans. So don't go in your council member or your state legislator's office, especially if you support a ceasefire resolution. I want to see it and, speak to an experience that you yourself do not have or had. Another thing is, issues. The politics is personal, right? And a lot of these issues impact our lives, just apart from, what's taking place in the Middle East right now. Apart from that, there are some other issues that people would get really passionate about, right? Public safety, right? Our schools, to housing, right? Jobs. There are a lot of issues that people can get passionate about. I think it's important to remember that when you are in these members' office, that the issue is the focus, the community is the focus, and whatever it is that you do should advance the long-term goal, right, of our collective that support this. This is not about individuals. This is not about one person. We are fighting here for a collective goal. And I just want folks to remember that. So when you reach out to your county council members and your state delegates and state senator, identify yourself. Hi, my name is X. I live at, if you want to give them your full address, you can. Most constituents do that when they reach out to me. And the whole purpose of that is establishing that legitimacy that you are their constituent. I pay attention. And then you can continue going in that email or in that meeting by saying, I've been following what's going on this issue, right? And I am deeply concerned by X. And I'm reaching out because I'm hoping that as my, Y council member, state delegate, state senator, that you would do Z, right? And so it's ensuring that you're using effective advocacy tools and tips so that we're getting what it is that we need to get done. Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that. Any Iman, any just like interactions that you've seen with elected officials where you're like, ooh, probably don't do that, right? Did you want to share any?
I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot. Being staff, I'm the one who picks up the phone. I'm the one who answers the emails. And I will say, there's a certain turn. Sorry, got a little jumbled up there. But there is a certain tone that sometimes people use, right? Where it's not the friendliest, it's not the most respectful. And what I think a lot of people fail to recognize or sometimes just forget because, this is not just, what's been going on, but just most issues are contentious issues and most issues that come before the state legislature, sometimes even the council, like the county councils, they can be contentious and people have very strong feelings about it. And that's completely valid and that's completely fine. But what I would really like to ingrain in everybody's mind is that there's another person reading your emails. There's another, person on the other end of the phone that is more often than not, like really trying to help you out and get to the root of your issue. And sometimes, when you feel like you're not getting the best service, quote unquote, from a specific member's office, it doesn't hurt to try again. And if you've had like a bad interaction, it doesn't hurt to try again. If you continue to have bad interactions, like absolutely, it might not, it might be on that office in particular, and then that should never happen. And it's unfortunate that it does happen. And then there's another layer here, and it is being a Muslim staffer. I will say that I'm one of 3 Muslim political staffers in the entire state of Maryland. And that can be a very lonely feeling. That can be a very defensive feeling as well, because, when you don't have a lot of representation in these spaces, I don't want to say you have to be on your best behavior, but that is the reality. because if a Muslim staffer or a visibly Muslim staffer, such as myself, is not on their best behavior with constituents, with their own principals and other members, it leaves a really bad taste in everybody's mouth. And it hurts when the community tries to advocate. So I need to be on my best behavior. And I know Muslims are no stranger to this because this is something that we've had to do over the years again and again. And it becomes very cumbersome and it becomes very tiring, but you're not just representing you. You are also representing the issue that you're fighting for, and you're also, representing the rest of the ummah. And that is something that we all have to keep in mind when we're conducting our daily businesses, when we're advocating, because the causes are so much bigger than us. And um, sometimes that doesn't get across in the emails or the phone calls. So I think, just general tone. Hey, like you said, Delegate Acevero, put your name, put your address. If you're not willing to put your full address, totally fine. We all understand that. If you
Yep.
could put your neighborhood or the road that you live on, no street address, but saying, hey, I live on Bladen Street. Um, and you represent my district. I'm a constituent. I'm concerned about this issue. And I was wondering if you could do this or you could do that, or we could figure out some way to make this better for my community or make this better for the county or the state. And when you do that, it opens up a dialogue with that member. And when you open up that dialogue, you begin a relationship. And relationships are incredibly important when you're advocating for things because, as you saw, there are so many legislators on different committees. And when you reach out to all of them, you want to start that rapport, you want to start that relationship so that when there is a pressing issue, more people will be willing to help you than just your specific members, if that makes sense. So when you're testifying on a bill, like I said, even if the sponsor is not your direct representative, still reach out to them because they'll be able to help you navigate the process, and you will also gain a relationship from that. And that those relationships can sometimes be invaluable, or most of the time invaluable. The relationships that I made when I was on the state level with other members 3 years ago, when I was an intern, have proven to be relationships that I still call on the most whenever I need something or whenever I'm advocating for my community. And there's a question in the chat, Delegate. Do you recommend calling repeatedly about the same issue? Does it make a difference?
Well, if we could tag team that answer, one,
Sure.
because um, uh, I'm, I'm, I'm a public official, but you also have political and policy staffers that do see these emails and answer them, that do take your calls or listen to your voice messages or voicemails. So if we could just tag team this answer, I'll say this. One, from elected official standpoint, um, advocacy is about repetition, because understanding that, in one interaction with your representative, you could convince them of what it is that you want them to do, right? But in that same meeting, you could also be unsuccessful at convincing them at that time. And so sometimes what that could mean is following up with some more information, trying to schedule another meeting. Remember, you are their constituent, you are our constituents. And so there is no limit to how many times you can meet with us, right? If you need to meet with us, virtually, or if you need to send us an email, etc., to follow up, there's nothing that's stopping you from doing that, because we have to essentially represent you, our constituents, and address concerns, right? So yes, you should follow up, but you should also do it in a way where you're not also, how do I put it? Yeah, I see finally, Iman. Yeah, so I'll pitch it over to Iman, and I'll just say that yes, continue to reach out on the issue. It may take a couple of tries. It may take more than a couple of tries in order to convince your representative of something. But then I want you to also remember too, and then I'll pitch it over to my friend here, that the people that hear your voice messages when you call, and let's say somebody's nasty, right, are the staffers first. I'm not coming in and listening to voice messages. Usually that's the staffer that's, helping the member to be able to serve you all. When you send off that email, right, or someone sends off that Islamophobic or that xenophobic email or what have you, that's the staffer that gets it first and reads it first. And so while you may think that you're speaking to the member, and you are, the people who are intercepting that message first and dealing with you and responding to that constituent concern or information are staffers. And they are people. They also come from diverse backgrounds as well. And so I sometimes consider that, Iman gave an example about, being the only Muslim staffer and one of two statewide, but consider for just a minute, there is an issue around public safety that people are pretty divided on, right? And you decide to send your council member a very nasty email, and that council member, an issue, let's say around surveillance, and particularly for the Muslim community, we know that's a huge issue, particularly post 9/11. And someone feels pretty, heated about it, and they send this email. And even though that member is not Muslim, it is a very Islamophobic and hate-filled email. And then you have folks like Iman and others who are reading it, who then have to respond and then have to communicate that to the member, because we know about emails. We know about the hateful ones. We know about the good ones. We know about the potholes, right? Because it's staffers that are briefing us. And I say that to say, be considerate of both the member, but also the staffers that are reading it. They're a way to convey your messages in a very effective way without having to really descend to a position that our opponents often take, and that is to be vile and vitriolic and hate and mean, etc. There are ways for us to effectively advocate, and I just ask, and I know that from this call and from working with Care Maryland and others, that there are ways to effectively advocate while not engaging in that kind of behavior. But I will just say, please reach out, continue to reach out, because we want to hear from you and we should hear from you. And if you don't hear from us, follow up again. But always remember that it's not just about that elected public official. It's also about the people around them that help them do their job.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Delegate. And in the interest of time, I will keep my answer short, because we want to end this by 10 p.m. so that we can all go to bed and freshen up for work tomorrow morning. So long story short, do you recommend calling repeatedly about the same issue? Absolutely. It does make a difference. We've seen it multiple times, time and time again. Not just calling repeatedly. If you and a bunch of your friends and a bunch of your neighbors are calling me about one specific issue that you're concerned about, it absolutely makes a difference, because there are some issues that I can handle on my own. Like, oh, okay, trash pickup wasn't done. I'm just using a council example, but trash pickup wasn't done. Okay, I will just send that over to the appropriate department and they will take care of it. But if it's something systemic, right? And I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if it is something that is repeatedly going on, so let's say trash pickup is routinely being missed in one neighborhood, and I have one person calling me, sure, I'll do the work 100%. But if I've got the entire neighborhood calling me, that speeds things up for the department. That speeds things up for me. That makes me let the councilman know that, hey, this is going on. You need to call this person, this person, this person to escalate all of these things. So it does make a difference. And I do just want to thank everybody for coming onto this. I know it's a lot of information. So if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to, Delegate Acevero's office. You can also reach out to mdoutreach@care.com, and I can drop that email in the box. And inshallah, you all have a good night. And thank you once again for everybody joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks so much.